All right, everybody, welcome back into the Stadium Seat Sports Podcast. My name's Coop here with my partner and co-host Quinn. And today, what we're going to be talking to you guys about is the marquee matchups that we highlighted here in week one. We're just going to be going over the games, highlighting some important stats and notes from those games, and kind of giving you our thoughts. So, Viv, I'll let you start it off. I think we're probably going to start off with the game we started off with in our week one recap as number 14 Clemson playing number one Georgia.
So obviously, all eyes were on this game. This was the first truly big matchup of the week one matchups there. And kind of as we talked about and I predicted, Georgia won by double digits relatively easily. Clemson put up a decent fight in the first half, kept things close, tie game for portion there. Unfortunately for them, that offense is just not able to move the ball. I thought Cade Klubnik made some good throws here and there, but ultimately that offense is dated. Dabo Swinney just can't seem to get out of his own way and take the next step and kind of be with the other college football elite programs on the offensive side, and that's going to continue to kind of hold them back, and definitely held them back in this game. Obviously, they went up against one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in college football. Malachi Starks was everywhere in that secondary, making amazing plays. For me, Georgia really just kind of kept things close first half, but that second half, Kirby Smart made some adjustments. I'm sure he ripped into his team a little bit there, and they just flipped it into another gear. And when that gear was hit, there was nothing Clemson could do to keep up. So week one, don't want to overreact, but I think Georgia kind of put the rest of college football on notice, saying, hey, we're the number one team for a reason. And Clemson kind of just reiterated the fact that they are no longer an elite program with a championship potential. I know that's a lot to take away from a week one matchup, but if they couldn't even compete off the bat there with Georgia, they're not a serious contender. That offense is not going to figure it out to the point where they can beat a Georgia. They should get better, and I think Klubnik is a decent to good quarterback, but just going up against a top end team like that, I think showed a lot of what to expect from Clemson this year, and it's not a whole lot as far as championship contender goes. They could definitely still compete in the ACC there, but I wouldn't bet on them to take home anything.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of great points there highlighting this game in pretty great detail. I mean, we talked about it in our preview. We said it was going to come down to Carson Beck and Cade Klubnik, and both of us thought that Carson Beck was the better quarterback, but Carson Beck was significantly better in this game. He was 23 of 33 with a QBR of 91.7, which significantly outplayed Cade Klubnik, where he was 18 to 29 with a QBR of 40.8. Clemson also had 23 rushes for a total of 46 yards. I mean, it was just a complete and utter total defensive domination for Georgia, including, and you kind of highlighted this player, and he's unbelievable. Could be right up there as the number one safety in the entire country, right there with Caleb Downs at Ohio State. An unbelievable interception by Malachi Starks. That was just an incredible play to see. And even the game was ultimately close in the first half, and Clemson's defense was flying around. Their defensive line, which I think I highlighted in our week one preview, is being like one of the elite groups for that team and kind of one of the elite groups in that regard in the entire country. It did help keep their team in the game, as their offense tried to get it going. Obviously, ultimately, their offense wasn't able to get anything going. And Georgia's talent and dominance just exerted itself in the second half on its way to a dominating, like 34-3 win. I mean, ultimately, I don't think that you overreacted to what you said in this preview and matchup. I think Georgia definitively inserted themselves as the number one team in the country. And until somebody takes them out and proves otherwise, they will remain the number one team in the country. I think Carson Beck is an unbelievable player. Heisman candidate, obviously, in my eyes, is one of, if not the Heisman favorites. I know that still probably belongs to Dylan Gabriel, but Carson Beck is unbelievable, leads that team. And if that's their performance in week one, in assumption that they continue to get better week in and week out, they're going to be a very, very scary team down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to our next game, number 8 Penn State at West Virginia. I'll take things at the start here, but Penn State last year dominated West Virginia, but in the way they did it was a little different this year. So the addition of Andy Kultelnicki, I think he did an amazing job just scheming up receivers wide open downfield. But the biggest difference was that Drew Aller showed poise and accuracy, and he was hitting those wide open receivers. And that kind of just blew things open for this game. That's an element that Penn State has been missing for a long time. This is what everyone wanted Drew Aller to do. I do caution that last year he did look good week one, then not so much the rest of the year. So that could, of course, happen again. Don't want to overreact. But if this is any sign of things to come, I really do think that Penn State will be elevated into the next echelon of college football teams. Right now, they're a number 8 team. This could put them in the thick of it if Drew Aller really takes that next step. He has all the tools, and he was making some great throws and decisions. So very excited to see where that goes. West Virginia just kind of laid an egg, and even that little halftime delay or where they just sat there, they came out flat. So Penn State owned that from start to finish. Very impressive. And of course, their defense showed up as we thought it would.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I wanted to start off, my kind of take on this game by just highlighting Drew Aller. I mean, he looked very, very good in this game. And we all know the tangibles that he possesses. We all know that he is highly capable of being an elite college quarterback who's capable of playing at the next level on Sundays. He posted a stat line, only 17 throws. He was 11 to 17, but he had a QBR of 98.3, which significantly, it was significantly better than what West Virginia's quarterback threw out there. And we all knew Drew Aller was the better quarterback, but how much he outplayed West Virginia's quarterback was kind of astonishing to me, considering this was a home game for West Virginia. I expected West Virginia to put up more of a fight in this game. I thought Penn State would win the game, but I did expect West Virginia to put up more of a fight. I thought that new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, as you highlighted, came in and he significantly improved Penn State's offense in game one. I thought that he would significantly improve this offense as the year went on, but I did not think that we would see such an improvement right from the start. And it was specifically in the downfield plays. Those plays of explosive nature, of 20 plus yards, 40 plus yards. I think I saw something, and I'll have to double check this. But Penn State's offense last year had 8 plays of 40 plus yards in the entire year last year. I think they had 4 in this game alone. So that is a huge, significant improvement in that regard. And if Penn State continues on that trajectory and continues to be able to move the ball down the field in multiple different ways, going to be a very, very dangerous team. Like West Virginia could not get anything going offensively in this game, and they're not some force to be reckoned with offensively. But I think Penn State's defense deserves a lot of credit for how they played in this game. Having to replace Manny Diaz as defensive coordinator this year, like he was a great defensive coordinator for that team. They didn't skip a beat. They came right in and just absolutely dominated this game. Both sides of the ball looked very good. Would not be surprised to see them sitting there, not just in the 12-team playoff, but potentially 11-1, and maybe even playing in the Big Ten championship. Because remember, we don't have divisions anymore. So Penn State 11-1, depending on what happens with the rest of the Big Ten, they could very easily find themselves playing in Indianapolis for that Big Ten championship. Wouldn't be surprised to see it.
All right, and then the next game, a game that you specifically kind of called out as Miami being a sleeper team ranked at number 19 on this year, and they kind of showed up. And I'll let you kind of kick things off here with the Miami versus Florida matchup.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I didn't feel super strong about my opinion to have Miami ranked inside the top 5 come the end of the year. But obviously, if they win the ACC, that would be the case. And that's why I had them in there. But I haven't trusted Miami for a long time. But after seeing what Clemson did against Georgia, and we'll touch on this briefly a little bit later, seeing Florida State be 0-2 and just looking absolutely horrendous in the first 2 weeks of the year, Miami just looks like the cream of the crop in the ACC, and I feel like right now they're an easy choice to pick to win that conference. I mean, Cam Ward in this game was incredible. In our week 1 preview, we discussed which QB was going to have a better game. Whichever quarterback took over for their team and led their team, Ward versus Mertz, was going to win this game, and it was not even close. We got the definitive answer. Ward was 26 of 35 with a QBR of 95.7. Mertz, and let me read this stat line to you. Mertz was 11 of 20, which, okay, that is what it is. That's fine. His QBR was 19.1, 19.1. I mean, that is the abysmal of the abysmal. I mean, that is just that might lose you a game to a potential FCS opponent. I mean, that is awful, and that pretty much describes the state of the Florida program at this point in time. Like Miami was the better team all around coming into this game, but I thought that Florida would at least put up a fight, and I thought playing in the swamp would be a difficult contest for the Miami Hurricanes. Their fans came in and took over that stadium. Their players took over that stadium. I mean, Billy Napier's time in Florida seems to be limited. It basically seems to just be a question, a matter of if or when, not if, excuse me, when he's gone from that program. I mean, he's losing the team left and right. They didn't even put up a fight in this game. I mean, I could talk for a very long time about the state of the Florida program, a proud program that should be a very good program year in and year out. Is just they look like a train wreck right now, and it starts at the top with Billy Napier. I mean, I don't have any takeaways from this game outside of Florida looks dead to me as a program right now, and Miami looks legit, and Cam Ward is absolutely a Heisman candidate, and potentially could find himself as the Heisman finalist if he keeps playing like this, or a Heisman favorite. Excuse me.
Yeah, and I agree with your takeaways here. Napier, he is on the hot seat right now. I know it's week one, but he has not been good since he got there. $26 million buyout. I don't know if the boosters can come up with that, but when you're in the SEC country, they tend to find a way. So unless some kind of crazy turnaround happens, they're going to find a way to get rid of him. He is a colossal bust. You have players posting images on social media saying F this team. And I mean, that's week one. The culture is broken. They came out so flat. They have way too much talent to look that bad, even though I think Miami's very talented and clearly the better team overall. But Florida should have at least been somewhat competitive for any portion of that game, and they just were absolutely brutal. Graham Mertz, like you said, just not very good. He's essentially a game manager with no dynamic skills whatsoever. And honestly, the only chance they have here to Florida has here to salvage the season, I think, is to start DJ Lagway, just because he's a 5-star freshman. Maybe he gives a jolt. Maybe he can help turn that locker room around. They need to try whatever they can at this point. Mertz is not going to win you any games. He is what he is at this point. So just go for it. See what happens, because Napier, if you don't start winning games right away, you're done for. And they have one of the hardest schedules in the SEC this year. So the odds of that happening anyway are close to none. So Florida, dead in the water. Miami, very impressive. Cam Ward looks legit. It is week one. I don't want to overreact, but he seems to be one of the missing components that Miami has not had in previous years. So we'll see how that plays out. But yes, exciting things for them. Okay, and then of course the next game here, number 7 Notre Dame versus number 20 Texas A&M. Arguably the game of the week. Definitely one of the most fun games to watch. Just two very physical teams clashing for four quarters here. For me, I think the biggest takeaway is Marcus Freeman finally got his signature win. And he did so playing with a lot of gutsy calls, 4th down conversions, going for it. He was not afraid, and he was going for that win the whole game. Just complete aggressiveness, and great to see a coach like him get that first signature win, because he had 2 years in a row where he kind of had chances to beat Ohio State, and now he finally did it against the Aggies here. So very impressive there, and I really think that could be a springboard for the rest of the year. They have an easy schedule. So I fully expect them to make the playoffs as long as they stay healthy. I do want to say, though, they used Riley Leonard a lot in the run game. He took a lot of big hits and pounding, and honestly, he's had injuries in the past. They cannot play like that game in, game out, and maybe it was one of those games where they just thought they had to bring their A game, go all out, take those hits, and then maybe in some of those easier games to kind of scale that back and keep them healthy. So that'll be key for them. And for the Aggies, I just felt like their defense looked pretty good. Wegman was very bad. He made mistakes. He was indecisive. He just held onto the ball too long. He needs to figure it out the Aggies want to have a good year, even with that defense. So we'll see what happens there, but they have to figure that out fast.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like honestly, for me, this game really kind of felt like a heavy hitting boxing match while I was watching it. And it's hard to say if both quarterbacks, Riley Leonard and Connor Wegman, if they both kind of had week one jitters. But to me, neither quarterback was overly impressive in this one. This one was really a defensive slugfest. Some, obviously some touchdowns were scored, but it was a very defensive minded game from both sides. Leonard was 18 to 30, had a QBR 66.7. Fantastic. Wegman, even worse, 12 to 30 with a QBR 31.8. So it very well could have just been week one jitters. Riley Leonard is brand new into the Notre Dame, scheme under Marcus Freeman. Obviously, was with Duke and Mike Elko last year. I think he's a very serviceable quarterback, so I expect him to get better. Same with Wegman. I think Wegman's got a lot of, talent, and he's got plenty of talent around him at Texas A&M. And I think Mike Elko's going to be a great coach for them. And he's going to get a lot out of them. But he was pretty abysmal in this game, and Texas A&M's defense, as you mentioned, was stout. And if they can get even just slightly better play out of Wegman, they could have a pretty solid year. And if they get great play out of Wegman as the year goes on, then they could be a very dangerous team. Obviously, Jadarian Price for Notre Dame broke that 47-yard touchdown run to get the game's first touchdown, and it didn't feel like it was like game over for Texas A&M. But given how much they were struggling offensively, it felt like they were in a precarious position, even only down 7 at that point in time. It just felt like Wegman and that offense could not move the ball down the field. And it was really, kind of a shame because their defense was really holding their own for the most part in this game. They were playing really, really well overall. As you mentioned, Marcus Freeman gets his signature win. Came quite close the last 2 years against Ohio State, especially last year in South Bend. Didn't get the win in either of those games. Did get his signature win here. So honestly, my takeaway from this game, Notre Dame's certainly a playoff contender. They got a relatively easy schedule. They do have to play USC later in the year, which we'll touch on this game next. And USC looked a lot more impressive than I think a lot of people probably expected them to. But I came out of this game, I'm concerned with both offenses for both teams, but I'm highly impressed with both defenses after this game. So things to improve on for both of them. But Notre Dame, as you mentioned, can kind of be a springboard for them to find themselves in the 12-team playoff because they really needed this win as they don't have a conference championship in order to kind of firmly put themselves in position to make it to that 12-team playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then moving on to the next game, number 23 USC versus 13 LSU. I'll let you kick things off on this one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously we're not taking a poll here, but raise your hand if you've heard this one before. Lincoln Riley has found himself another star quarterback in Miller Moss. I thought Miller Moss looked really, really good in this game. And I know we got to see Miller Moss against Louisville in the bowl game last year where he had 6 touchdowns. And I expected him to fit in quite nicely, probably better than Caleb Williams into the actual system. Not saying he is a better quarterback than Caleb Williams, from an athletic standpoint or even overall, but I think he fits into the system better, which I think pays dividends for USC in the long run. And on the other side, too, Nussmeier played very well in this game for me. Like, we tweeted out that he looked clinical on that first drive. Ultimately, it didn't end up any points because USC got the nice fourth and goal stop. LSU kind of gambled. No pun intended with them being in Vegas there, but like they didn't come away with any points. But I thought that Nussmeier played really well in this game. Unfortunately, he had the one mistake between both quarterbacks. He had the interception. Moss didn't have any turnovers in this game, and ultimately, that's where I think Moss, gets the nod for me over Nussmeier, but it's not a significant margin. I thought both quarterbacks played really, really well. And then something I don't think very many people, if any, saw, coming out of this game, both defenses looked significantly improved. I think there was hope from both fan bases and just viewers around the country that the defenses would improve. They couldn't get much worse for either of these two teams from what they've had over the last several years, but both defenses looked significantly improved. USC was flying around. They were hitting hard. They were actually in the right positions, which has been a problem with them in the past. They were always out of position. I mean, it was like they were a paper bag defense in the past. I thought Finland got this team significantly improved in the defensive side of the ball here in week one, especially. So with Miller Moss going to be, looks to be an elite quarterback, Lincoln Riley always has great to elite offenses. And if this defense is improved, they could be a very dangerous team, and they could be a really interesting team to watch. And something that I think they mentioned during the podcast of this game that I did not know, I mean, is really kind of a surprising stat to me, is that LSU has not won an opening game since 2019. Brian Kelly's 0-3 in week one games since taking over at the helm at LSU. And that is something similar to what we touched on with Billy Napier in Florida. That's a program that's rich in history, is very proud, and has a lot of success under their belt. That's not a patient fan base, nor should they be with the amount of talent that they have. So the fact that he's 0-3 in week one games is it's really disappointing. And I know they've had top opponents this year. They opened up with USC last year. They opened up with Travis and Florida State. Not Travis, excuse me. Jordan Travis and Florida State. Like, they've had tough week one opponents compared to some FCS opponents and, lowly FBS opponents. But you have to be better than that at LSU. I thought that they looked overall quite good in this game. I think Brian Kelly made some mistakes from the coaching perspective, and I fully expect them to turn it around and get, a win here in week two. But they missed an opportunity to win this game, and it would have been a very good catapult for their program.
Yeah, and another week one loss for Kelly, like you said, and also just remind me to never bet on LSU in week one as long as Brian Kelly's the head coach. I thought he handled things post the game terribly. He criticized his team. He threw his quarterback under the bus, and like you said, I thought Nussmeier played pretty well, and he definitely was not the reason they lost. And I think he's just another example of another SEC coach whose hot seat could be getting hotter. He might have a little more runway than Napier, but if he's not careful, that seat could get very hot this year, especially based on this first game. Like you said, I thought Miller played great. He was very efficient, and I loved watching when they would get the ball into the hands of Branch. Branch is so dynamic. He could take it to the house anytime he touches it. So definitely a duo to watch throughout the year. USC's defense looks like they took a step in the right direction. Don't want to overreact because it's week one, but USC's defense has not looked remotely average for the last few years. And that USC defense was wrapping up, making tackles. They were in the right position for the most part. So very positive signs for them. And if that can continue, they could find their way into the playoff. But don't want to overreact on week one, but we'll see how that plays out. Okay, and those were the marquee matchups, but we did have just a few quick little call-out games that we kind of maybe discussed in our previous video, or we just felt had to come up after this past week. So, Coop, I'll let you kind of take the first matchup here.
But yeah, we'll highlight the game you touched on. This is one that we didn't showcase in our week one matchups, and it wasn't one that we either one of us thought we would ever be talking about. But that's number 3, Oregon versus Idaho. I'm significantly concerned for Oregon coming out of this game. They only managed to beat an FCS team by 10 points, and it was a 6-point game late in the fourth quarter. Like, I watched this game and I thought that there was a significant chance that Oregon was going to lose this game. Like, Idaho gave it their all and they attacked Oregon's weaknesses. So it'll really be interesting to see if Boise State follows a similar approach this weekend, or if Dan Lanning's going to correct the mistakes and get Oregon rolling like we all expect them to roll this year. This isn't the Boise State of old, but this is a Boise State team that could still be very dangerous, especially if you just beat an FCS opponent in Idaho by 10 the week before. Like, my biggest concern is that Oregon's offensive line got pushed around by Idaho's defensive line. And I understand Oregon had some injuries on the offensive line throughout fall camp, and some of those injuries really showcased themselves in this game, given their lack of push and ability to control the line. Like, Gabriel was 41 for 49 in this game, passing for almost 400 yards, and you see that stat line, and you're like, man, Oregon must have won by 40. But they won by 10 points, and he had to throw that much because of the fact that they just legitimately could not run the ball in this game. I mean, I never thought that this game was going to go the way that it did, and I guess that just goes to show college football is very unpredictable. I still think Oregon can be that elite of the elite teams, potentially vying for and winning a national championship this year, but highly concerned after week one, so I hope to see some significant improvement.
And then just a quick recap on some of the upset alert games. So if you listen to our previous episode, North Dakota State versus Colorado, we kind of called out as, hey, this could be an upset alert. and it very, very nearly was. There's a few close calls that could have kind of swayed the game, and even on the last play of the game, completed a Hail Mary a couple of yards short of the end zone. Things could have gone in a drastically different direction. I thought Colorado showed a lot of the same weaknesses as last year. With that being said, they're undisciplined. They're lacking in the trenches. The defense was giving up big plays. They were just committing late hits and bad penalties. I think we're going to see a very similar outcome for Colorado. They have a tough matchup with Nebraska next week, so we'll kind of see how that plays out. Maybe it's a week one outlier and that team will come together over time, but they showed a lot of the same concerns we had with them last year. And then the other game we called out as a sleeper was Michigan versus Fresno State. Michigan pulled away at the end, but it was a one-score game in that fourth quarter. And that right there is highly concerning if you're a Michigan fan, but also Fresno State was a few mistakes away from making it a game. They had the ball in the red zone. They threw a pick six. If Keene played better and made better decisions, and even early on, he was missing wide open guys throwing the ball high because he was clearly nervous, that could have came out a lot differently. So while both our sleeper picks did not come through and win, they definitely could have. So that is definitely something to keep an eye on there.
Really interesting, though, neither one of our upsets happened, but they were very close to happening. So I think ultimately were some pretty good picks by us there.
Yeah, absolutely. A few things go a different way, and we're talking about some major upsets. So
yeah, for sure.
We'll have another preview later in the week, and we'll provide some more potential upsets to keep an eye on. And just real quick before we wrap things up, I just wanted to call out our players of the week. So for me personally, there was a number of people you could have called out, but I feel wrong not bringing up a guy who put up video game numbers, and even though it was maybe against a lesser opponent, Boise State running back Ashton Genty, I believe is how you pronounce it, rushed for a school record, 267 yards, 6 touchdowns, averaged over 13 yards a carry. He saved them from being upset. I mean, just video game numbers, absolutely incredible. I just want to call him out. I don't know if he has the longevity or the team to be a serious Heisman candidate, but nonetheless, when someone puts up those kind of numbers, you have to call it out. So shout out to him.
Absolutely, and we'll see what he does this upcoming week against Oregon. It'll be really interesting. But no, you highlighted it. He had a fantastic week, literally putting up NCAA college football numbers, like literally just unbelievable. Would never think that that's a stat line that you would see outside of a video game. So great highlight. Mine, briefly touched on it earlier when we did our review of this game, is Cam Ward with the Miami Hurricanes. He led his team in a very difficult environment and did not skip a beat. He looked like the Heisman frontrunner in my eyes in that game. He looked unbelievable, and we're going to see how this year continues. I think Cam Ward's phenomenal. I think Miami is a very good team coming out of that game, but we're going to find out here. I think the ACC is down, so you might not find out, in conference play because the ACC is not super stout this year, but at the same point in time, we'll find out if it's just Florida is that lowly and just that bad at this point in time, or is Miami and Cam Ward truly this good? But he's my player of the week. I just was astonished by that performance, and I knew Cam Ward, had the tangibles and the ability to be great. I did not expect him to be that level of elite. So highly impressed with him. Excited to see what he does, here in week 2, but also just the rest of the year. I think he's going to have a fantastic year, and if he keeps playing like that, then sky's the limit for that Miami team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is it for today's video. Thank you everyone for listening in. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Coop, do you have anything for our listeners?
No. As you said, just like, subscribe, really helps us out. Leave your comments below. If you guys have any differing opinions or if you agree with our opinions, and we'll see you guys a little later in the week for, some of our preview games for week 2.